A Judicial Conduct Tribunal will hear evidence today in a 12-year-old complaint against Western Cape Judge President Hlophe. Now, he's accused of trying to influence the outcome of cases relating to corruption charges against former President Jacob Zuma. Now, Justices DIanne Hawker, Basin Kabinde, and the late Justice Chris Jafta laid an unprecedented joint complaint claiming that, in fact, he sought to influence the outcome of those then pending cases before the courts. For an idea of how today is likely to pan out, we've got in studio Newzroom Afrika Special Projects Editor DIanne Hawker, who's been following this case for better or for worse for quite a long time. DIanne, always great getting your take on these legal issues. So
I just want to correct you on one thing.
Yes.
Chris Jafta is not late. He is one of the complainants and he is very much still alive.
Okay, wow. That's important to
That
clarify.
is important.
Especially because we'll get to that in just a moment.
Yes.
There are complainants who have died, sadly.
Yes.
And, we'll unpack what that means. But as a start, 12 years in the making, it almost feels like. We're here now. Why does today matter?
Well, I think it matters because you really can't have this kind of a cloud hanging over the head of a legal bench or the court or a regional bench of the court for such a long time. As much as the complaint was heard in 2009 and finalized, and at the time the Judicial Service Commission did issue a report saying that essentially because there were so many different stories, they wouldn't continue with trying to kind of get to the bottom of it. So they felt that they wouldn't get to the crux of what actually happened in that meeting and whether it was in fact any kind of influence. That was then challenged in court by the former Premier of the Western Cape as well as Freedom Under Law, and then the court subsequently found that it wasn't sufficient to say that just because there were so many different stories you wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of it. In fact, they asked the Judicial Service Commission to go further and actually dig and try and get to the truth of what happened and make a final determination, because in a way it did leave aspects of it unclear. Right. And that's why this is important today, so that I think we can have finality to that complaint, which does involve senior members of the court.
Right. I don't want to take it for granted that everybody's following the story, because there have been accusations, counter-accusations, and it's been over a long time.
Yes, absolutely.
The allegation in this particular matter is that Justice Hlophe has some kind of interest in protecting the former president.
Yes.
Help us understand why.
So the allegation relates to a conversation or two conversations that he had with two judges of the Constitutional Court in 2008. Now, he visited the court on two separate occasions, went and saw Judge President Kabinde, went to see Judge Chris Jafta and spoke to them about other issues, but included in the conversation, in both conversations, he mentioned the Jacob Zuma matter. Now, previously when the case was heard, the evidence was that he kind of indicated that it would be in the interest of the court to find in favor of then Deputy President Jacob Zuma. And what then transpired was that there was a feeling by the full bench of the Constitutional Court that was an attempt to influence the court. But things got a little bit tricky, because then the people that the conversations were had with, which is Judges Kabinde and Jafta, they were then reluctant to actually be party to that complaint. So we saw a flurry of court cases, some brought by Judge Hlophe, some brought by external parties, some brought by Judges Kabinde and Jafta. I think it came to about 14 different court cases that have taken place over time, leading us now to this point. How we got here was that there was a Constitutional Court judgment and a Supreme Court of Appeal judgment, which basically said, look, this thing has to proceed, and it dealt with all the different matters, and the ultimate point was that it can't keep hanging forever.
Right. And we're obviously hoping that there'll be some kind of finality at the end of this process. What do we know about the witnesses that are likely to speak today?
Well, we understand that Judges Kabinde and Jafta are meant to testify today. We went and we checked out the venue yesterday and were able to kind of see the lay of the land. The understanding is that one of them will be testifying in person and another will be testifying on Zoom. Those are the only witnesses that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean that's the end of the witness list. We do know because at the time, all the judges of the Constitutional Court submitted a complaint. So you might see an instance where other judges might be called to speak to that. In the interview that I did with Judge Hlophe, he indicated that he intends to testify. So I believe we will see him take the stand at some point this week. It's set down for 5 days, but if there are only a few witnesses, obviously that will take a shorter time period. And then what will happen is the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, which is the people who are actually hearing this, they have to conclude a report, which they will then submit to the Judicial Service Commission, and the Judicial Service Commission makes the final determination. And that's essentially the process.
And when you say making a final determination, what's the worst possible case scenario for a Judge Hlophe if this process, whatever that means, doesn't go in his favor?
Yeah. Well, this is a misconduct complaint, so it's quite a serious one, and misconduct is one of the 3 things that a judge can be impeached over. So essentially removed from his position. So it's quite, the stakes are quite high when it comes to Judge Hlophe. If he is impeached as a judge, it means that he will lose his benefits. He won't be able to serve as a judge anymore. Judges, as we know, are paid for life. So even once you retire as a judge, you continue to get your pension and you continue to be paid by the state. This is so that the state can enlist you to do other work. So for example, the chairperson of this tribunal is a retired judge,
right,
and he can be enlisted to do this work because he continues to be paid by the state beyond his term as an actual judge. So it has it does have serious implications depending on the outcome for Judge Hlophe.
We touched on this already. I mean, this has been described as an unprecedented complaint against Judge Hlophe, but part of what might murky the waters is that some of the complainants are now deceased.
Yes, well, exactly, and I think it does make it a bit difficult because at the time the head of the court, the head of the Constitutional Court, was Judge Pius Langa, who passed away in 2013. And if you read Judge DIanne Moseneke's book, in the description of the meetings that happened that kind of got to the point of actually laying a complaint, those conversations were overseen, or I suppose led by, the then head of the court, which would have been Justice Pius Langa, who's no longer with us. We don't know whether Judge Moseneke will be called on to testify at all, but he was also part of those discussions. And in the conversation that he had with Kathy Motlatlana earlier this year, he does briefly touch on the fact that he wrote about it in the book. But of course, in the book, he doesn't go into much detail. Yeah. He kind of just lays the facts. And in the interview, he says to Kathy that he wants people to decide of their own accord as to what happened. But you can definitely see that Judge Pius Langa and Judge Moseneke had a lot of conversations that led to the final determination that the complaint would really be not a complaint of 2 individuals, but a complaint of the court as a whole. And that's really what also makes it quite unprecedented, that the whole Constitutional Court complained against another senior judge.
Certainly something we haven't seen ever, I imagine, if not in an incredibly long time. Thanks very much for helping us understand the different dynamics around this particular issue. We'll be watching it very closely here on Newzroom Afrika. DIanne Hawker is our special projects editor. Thanks very much once again.